Now I invite Sari Matila. She is a professor in IIM Bangalore, Indian Institute of Management. Yes, please, Sari. We met in our university and we immediately became friends. And I'm very glad that she came and she can share with us her thoughts on management.
Thank you, Vladimir, and thanks for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to be here because this is actually my first time here, not physically because I came last year, but I spent only one day. So you can imagine that this kind of place, you can't get much out of the place other than you see that what has been happening. You visit the Mati Mandir and that's it. And it was plus 40 degrees. So it was quite an experience. Okay, it's also very interesting to speak after the previous presenter because I sort of feared this. You have these divine flowers bringing all kinds of divine properties, and then you sort of descend to something mundane like management, or if you think it's mundane, we can also think about management in different ways. And one of the title was, the original title which Vladimir actually sent me, wasn't really discussed, was it? Was that concepts of integral management. And I'm sitting there and wondering that, I don't think I know enough of integral management from the perspective he might want me to discuss. But I thought that I do have an idea what integral might mean, integrating different parts of you and where you are and how do you function with others, with yourself, in the world. So let me start from there. And I must say that I did have a PPT, but as you can imagine, it's been rewritten during these days. And one of the key breakthroughs came for me personally, because this is about my personal experience about management. I'll give you a bit of background. I grew up in a business family. So I had business coming out of my ears and coming out of my eyes, and you touched business and it was everywhere. It was in the family life, it was outside the family, it was everywhere. It was a small town in Finland, so there was no escape from it. And I thought that, this is something I will never do. Management is something that I will never do. So I found myself later on studying management. Then I said that, okay, perhaps if management is not precisely what I want to do, what would it be? Well, I found another area where I said, no, this I will never ever do, which is philosophy. So I found myself studying philosophy. But all of this made sense to me only because I had been riding. And horses were my key and my way of looking at what management could actually be. It has the word manus, hand. Is in that hand, manus. What do you do with horses? You handle horses. You can handle them by pressing them. You can handle them by giving them opportunity to join in. Which one do you do? Or are there other opportunities also? You can approach horses in various ways. You can look at the rider and the horse, or even the handler and the horse, as a unity. And I can tell you that the unity has been broken many times. And sometimes it's because of me, and sometimes it's because of the horse. If I were to see myself as a noun, management, or even as someone who's sort of leading as a manager on a horse, and I see the horse as an organization. And the organization obviously don't want to do everything I want it to do. We have to agree, we have to negotiate, we have to be on the same level. And horses are good because they tell you immediately when you are not on their level. And I've spent numerous hours walking back to the stables on my own. There was something else that I was taught with horses, and this somehow resonates with something that we discussed here. It's kind of the idea of direction. We have been practicing that almost every afternoon. In riding, what they say is that, you know, when you're jumping fences, you throw your heart first and then you follow. I literally thought first that you're supposed to go also. So many a times there was the horse on the other side and me on the other side. Until I realized that really I need to start listening. Listening is a skill that you need with horses. You can't manage them without listening. It's not about control at all. Control doesn't come even in the picture. It's only when you understand the horse. And I think that was my hermeneutic path into understanding, or at least trying to understand what organizations are and why we have so many troubles. Even if you look at the horse as an organization, it's still one. What if you had hundreds of horses? And because also horse is the symbol of power. It's a very significant symbol of power. So you have 600 kilos, more or less, and you're around 50 to 70 kilos. So no way you can fight this battle. So that's why I always tell that I learned so much about management from horses, because I can actually put that in practice. I can put it in practice many ways. One is the feeling. You can feel when something is out of balance. You can feel when people are not happy. You can feel many things. Also, it makes you humble. I've sprained my hands, I've broken my collarbones because I wasn't humble. Ego issues. Horses tell you that your ego is slightly, on the higher side today. So we might lower it. Once I was in a competition with a small pony, and I was like, oh, I'll win everything. You're supposed to be in management, very success-oriented. I'll win at this. So I treated the horse in such a way that it threw me into a pond. So there I was, like, what a great opportunity to learn of humility. I don't think I learned it quite at that moment, but at least the seeds were given. All right, so that's kind of an introduction of what I'm trying to say, because these 4 days have been that kind of a journey again for me. It's going back to that feeling, how it felt when things went actually well. And the kind of joy that you get when you really find that, oh wow, this is a moment of balance. And that tremendous joy that comes out of that balance. And that we call it perhaps flow nowadays, but it's not the same thing. It's really a joy that you want to laugh, you want to scream, you want to do anything, that you get that few seconds of total bliss. And it's usually very short, because when you realize it, then you start, oh, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do? And then it becomes kind of something that you try to do and try to accomplish. So something struck me and about the concepts is that we were yesterday talking about chariots. And I was thinking, it is true that concepts are somewhat like chariots. We have different kinds of chariots for different purposes, but also it depends what horses we put in front of it. Or do we put horses at all? So, I'm talking to myself, very Finnish. Yes, but in Finland it's a kind of a habit. Everyone talks to themselves because we are so few that there is no one else to talk to. Anyway, yeah, very Finnish. So I was, but also I was a bit sort of thinking that we have concepts, yes, they're carriers, you can take, they take us somewhere, depending on what we put in front of them. But also, what about the naming? Doesn't it limit? Then I was thinking of the story of Little Prince, how the taming of the fox, by naming it, it became so powerful and so specific. And then there is this idea, can I leave it? Can I leave it? It becomes, does it become mine? Do I need to own it? Do I need to care about it? Am I responsible for it? And I think that story somehow beautifully explains why words are so precious and concepts are so precious. And how we fall in love with them because we have named something. And I was also thinking about the names that we are given. Obviously in India there's this wonderful tradition that a name has name and the explanation of the name, which doesn't exist in Finland. But what does it mean to be of certain name? Like what does it mean to express Sariness in me? And all these thoughts have gone through my mind during these 4 days. Because when I went to Matrimandir yesterday, what I didn't realize last time when I went there, either the introduction was not so clear as it was yesterday, or I missed it for other reasons, or something else went wrong. But this time I somehow was able to listen much more carefully what was said. And I understood that the Matrimandir is kind of it's bursting from the ground, the consciousness is coming onto the ground, and the petals are giving away, kind of way to it, to come to the ground. And I was thinking that, oh, that's a wonderful, that reminded of me of the story of Sita. That Sita was has been said to be the daughter of the earth, Mother Earth. But then I thought that what happened to the Sita in the end? Is that the reason that the consciousness went in the hiding again? And now it's starting to come again. And I think that led me to think that the role of femininity in all of us and how we have suppressed the nature in order to bring up the knowledge. And I was reminded of Plato's thoughts that we have 4 types of knowledge. One is the images, then the beliefs, which have not been verified. And then you have knowledge, which is verified. But higher than that is wisdom. And wisdom is something that is a property of nature. It's not only about knowing possessing that knowledge, but it's about also using and being wise with one's use. Obviously, being wise is, I think, one of the most difficult things. Holistic process, to me, is connecting with that nature very strongly, because I found in myself that through my studies, I lost that connection. So I had to go back to practices where you literally work with nature and reacquaint yourself with it. Learn about flowers, learn about birds, learn about trees, learn about your own nature also. And while it may be very obvious to you, I must tell you that it's not obvious to everyone, including me. I found so many people who have lost that connection, and I think that's where in management we have the problems, that we are not able to connect the hand to what it's supposed to be connected. It's kind of suppressing everything. Something that I wanted to sort of perhaps end with, because I think everyone is very hungry, is a kind of a picture that I've been developing. And this is partly, which I've been developing earlier, but partly also influenced what each one of you have said, because it's a kind of a process which I have come to understand here. And I'd like you to have your feedback on it. So it started with the whirling dervishes. So the picture that came to my mind was this. This was the whirling, but where are they whirling to? Then came the idea of direction. Then I said that who sees the direction? Then came the eye of, I termed it the eye of Horus. The idea that your senses are extremely important. You find all the 6 senses in the eye of Horus, that it sees everything. And then when I went to Matrimandi, I said that this was kind of an origin, because I thought that there are 2 kinds of knowing processes or knowledge processes. One is the direct, which is often portrayed through yoga, that you try to raise your consciousness upwards. In many yoga traditions, not in all. But that's a very masculine way of doing it. So this is very masculine, directly up, which then also requires you to step back from the everyday life. Whereas the feminine is more like this. You have to take into consideration and with you a lot of other aspects too, like relationships. And this has been looked at, especially in ethics. If you look at Lawrence Kohlberg and how he sees the moral development, and you look at Carol Gilligan, how she sees the moral development, they're very different. They are both development, but there's a different way of looking at it. The other one looks at, Gilligan looks at how relationships mold us, and how we then, from there, find our way up. Whereas Kohlberg looks at that, how your cognitive abilities change. So I think that was the basis, that there's a masculine and feminine force. I'm not saying that they are only male and female. But something was missing here, in my mind. One is that this won't stand if the legs are not long enough. They are the roots. And we need the Mother Nature, which was the Matrimandir. It's not exactly in the proportions I drew it, but this was my idea, and this was the kind of thought that I wanted to bring here, because I think concepts in themselves don't really have any meaning unless we start molding them to those vehicles and that help us to change things. And there I want to end. Thanks.
Thank you, Sari. We've had these discussions before, and I was very fascinated by this binary that you came up with, the masculine and the feminine, and the way you mapped it onto nature and knowledge. And in many ways, we have come across this binary over the last 4 days, where we have posited a binary between action and the actor and the passive, a consciousness which is embodied and which has agency and power to act, and that which is just a witness or a sakshi. Or the word and stillness and silence, or music and stillness and silence. So on the one hand, that which is active, a subject, and that which is an object. Whereas, in many traditions, in fact, this binary just does get dissolved. And we were talking about this, like, for instance, you achieve whatever state you want to achieve, say it's consciousness, through practice, practices which are embodied, practices which are of the body, like Tantra that we were talking about, or practices of the self, where an external action produces an inner state of being. Like typically Sabah Mahmood's example, where she asks a lot of Islamic women why they wear the burqa if they are not internally chaste. Are they being hypocritical by wearing the burqa or the hijab if they are not internally chaste? And their answer reverses the question. They say it's the act of wearing the hijab that inculcates modesty or chastity in me. So it's interesting to think of these binaries and how we may reverse them or subvert them and the consequences thereof. Thank you.
in a way, concepts can also be seen as feminine and masculine, and we have used a lot of power language lately in the 20th century, and perhaps we may need to look at that also, that why are we using certain concepts and not the others? And I'm looking for that same balance that I felt on the saddle, or without saddle for that matter. And I think for me, as a product of Western society, it's really been important to look at this both in me. And because often what is said about the Western, not all, but many Western women, is that they're very masculine in their approach. They have lost the sense of femininity in some sense. And I earlier thought that I felt it like, what is this person saying? That it's almost like, you're going back. But now I have realized that it's really important. It's really important because that gives you the sensitivity. The same with males. That if you don't have the balance, then we have problems that we are having now. And management has been so control-oriented. And it's time to let go, because you can't reach that integral vision, and you can't vision to begin with without letting go. Because control and vision are very different. You can't have them both at the same time. You can have discipline, which is different from control.
Do you have an example of a company that does this already, like in a good way?
I think you would need to look at startups more than. But there's one company which is interesting, which is trying to do this, which is Semco in Brazil. So, because they have given the power to their workers to design how they, or any worker-led initiatives, at least they are trying to break the power structure, which you may need to look at. But Semco is otherwise a very traditional company, but in this sense it's very progressive. And it works with them. Patagonia. Where is that? Canada, all right, because it sounded very Spanish.
Yeah, and there is also on corporation level what Sari was talking about. In Spain, they have collaboratives. There are famous collaboratives owned by employees. They are most profitable, most vibrant culture. That there's no shareholders. They have been trying to transfer all these models so that and there's also NGO. If you want to see a website of them, democracy collaboratives. So if you search this website, they have been working on all this type of work as NGO, supporting government and businesses to have this model to be more replicated. There you have a lot of Cleveland Foundation, what they have been done in Cleveland. So if you go to democracy collaboratives, that website, it will also guide you to that Spain work in corporation.
Okay.
Thank you, Sari, for giving the example of the horse. And I wanted to point out that it has also been used by Christine Neff in understanding compassion, especially self-compassion, and working with horses for people on the autistic spectrum, including her own son. And it's such an amazing thing. And asking about examples, Google has some interesting work they've been doing for many years. 20% of employee time is their time, and they can do what they want. And Google changed and became the Alphabet company, where they're incorporating some of these great ideas, including in healthcare, DNA, and all that, into full-fledged companies. So really good things can come out of what is normally known as feminine style or collaborative leadership. And I used to live close to Google, and it was such a blessing to see what started off as a very masculine, get the job done company transforming into how can we serve humanity, or how can we serve the planet. Everything that has come out more recently has been because of employee-driven initiatives.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's precisely the spiral. This is supposed to sort of denote that there's a progress going on, and then you become more self-aware, and then you can give away your own power. It has always buggered me, this word of empowerment, because it denotes that somebody gives you power. You can't take it yourself, but it's about taking it yourself and putting it into practice. Okay, now it becomes too... Okay. Any other...
This isn't exactly a question. There's an organization called BVG. I'm not sure. Has anybody heard about BVG? Okay. Yeah, because even I'm not very sure of the full form. But the entire philosophy is based on Swami Vivekananda's teachings. And the only purpose of this company is helping mankind. Helping mankind. As in, they are completely into alternative fuels and fundraising for different for literacy programs, and yeah, that's the motive of the company.
Thanks for reminding, because a friend of mine just recently said that they have a thriving startup, so it's set up also, but startup where they do voluntary work. Nobody actually gets paid, but they are still flourishing, and they are bound together because they have an idea that they want to make a change. So I think that's a e-spirit. Service space. All right, so examples are coming up. So I hope that bit by bit companies start coming up. You may set up a company, any of you.
I was involved in Project Happiness.
Yes.
We started up with 3,000 people, went to 2.2 million.
Yes.
About how to spread joy.
Yes. So I think these, when they become mainstream, it takes some time, but when they become, they will definitely then introduce a lot of changes. So I'll end here unless there are any more questions, and I think we have learned our lunch. Thank you.